Good evening. It's Monday, August 24th. Firefighters make up some ground in battling three major Bay Area blazes after the region dodges another lightning storm. Governor Newsom says the state is fighting more than 600 fires. They've burned an area about the size of Delaware.
We're currently battling some 625 fires across the state. Sadly, we've lost 7 lives so far to these latest fires.
President Trump is formally renominated as the GOP presidential candidate. He repeats his baseless claim that mail-in voting will lead to fraud.
We're going to win this election. The only way they can take this election away from us is if this is a rigged election. We're going to win this election. We're going to win this election.
Wisconsin's governor calls out the National Guard to confront what's likely to be another night of protest in Kenosha after police shoot a 29-year-old black man in the back. Jacob Blake is hospitalized fighting for his life. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy tells a House committee he won't return blue mailboxes or mail sorting machines, but denies their removal was aimed at sabotaging the November election. Democrats aren't buying it.
What leader would think that even the possibility of slowing down mail in a time such as this is a good idea? What leader would take steps to freeze overtime for a workforce literally risking its life every day to deliver mail to the people of this nation?
And Lakota organizer Nick Tilson says he wants a trial and won't agree to a plea deal on his felony charges resulting from the protest against President Trump's July 3rd appearance at Mount Rushmore. From KPFA Berkeley and KPFK Los Angeles, this is the Pacifica Evening News. I'm Eileen Alfandary. Weary firefighters battling three giant blazes in the Bay Area got a break when what was feared could be a repeat of the previous weekend's lightning storms didn't materialize. The National Weather Service lifted a warning for dry lightning and gusty winds that could have started new fires and fanned existing ones. But the mammoth wildfires continue ravaging Bay Area communities, and the known death toll rose to 7. Fire officials said there's a long way to go before the fires are out. Communities can assess the damage, and Bay Area residents can venture outside and breathe again. Christina Onnested reports.
Firefighters got a reprieve from another round of lightning that was forecast at week's end, in the Bay Area at least. Shanna Jones, unit chief for the LNU North Bay fires, says other parts of the state were not as lucky.
The predicted weather that we were expecting overnight did not produce the lightning that we were expecting. This is great news. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for the rest of the state. There was lightning, and which does spark new fires. I want to tell you that everyone on the line is extremely tired, but working so incredibly hard.
A lightning warning was lifted in the Bay Area and Sacramento Valley, but continues in the rest of Northern California and the Sierras, where lightning ignited 10 fires over the weekend. Meanwhile, state officials say 3 fires scorching across the Bay Area are unprecedented. 2 of those fires are now vying for the most destructive fire in state history. Here's Governor Gavin Newsom.
Just consider last year at this stage, this date. Last year in 2019, we had 4,292 wildfires in the state of California, burned about 56,000 acres. 4,292 wildfires this time last year. Today, over 7,000 wildfires, 7,002, burning now north of 1.4 million acres. 56,000 acres to date last year, over 1.4 million acres this year.
The vast majority of those acres, 1.2 million acres, burned in the last week after a series of lightning strikes created a massive inferno that's still blazing in the North Bay, the East Bay, and the South Bay. It amounts to nearly 2,200 miles, larger in size in the state of Delaware. The death toll stands at 7 after another body was discovered in Vacaville, and a man in his 70s was found dead in the Santa Cruz fire in a remote area called Last Chance. Newsom says 1,200 buildings have been destroyed, but he notes many more have likely burned. They just haven't yet been reported. Some 14,000 firefighters have been deployed to battle the blazes. Nearly 250,000 Californians are under evacuation orders and warnings. But as resources are stretched thin, some people in rural areas are fighting fires on their own without any assistance from state and local authorities. The LNU complex of fires in Napa, Sonoma, Lake, Yolo, and Solano counties is the second largest in state history, and the most destructive of those now burning. It scorched more than 350,000 acres and has destroyed 845 homes and other buildings. It's 22% contained. LNU Unit Chief Jones says they still have a ways to go.
The size and complexity of this fire is not one that we've seen in times past. So I really want to let you know how much I appreciate your patience. As we've said to you for the many days that this fire's been, it's going to take time to put this fire out.
The SCU fires to the east and south bay have burned 347,000 acres. It's the third largest fire in state history. The fires have spread to 7 counties now: Santa Clara, Alameda, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, and Stanislaus, along with Merced and San Benito counties. That fire has destroyed 24 structures. It threatens about 20,000 more. 5 people have been injured. It's about 10% contained. SCU CAL FIRE Incident Commander Chief Jake Ike calls the unprecedented fires a mega fire and warns it can get even larger.
We are battling one of the most challenging and complex fires, wildland fires in California history, simultaneously with other fires in our north and south of us here that are also some of the most complex and challenging fires in California history. As Chief has stated, these mega fires are very challenging to deal with. It's taxing all of the local, state, and federal law enforcement and fire service communities. This fire is by far a long ways away from being done or completed as we work towards containment. We still have many challenges. This fire still has the potential to grow in significant acreage in many different areas along the fire.
Speaking from the Alameda County Fairgrounds, fire officials say people living in rural areas of the SCU fire who need help and want to be informed are welcome to attend community roundup meetings each day at 10 a.m. with CAL FIRE officials. The Alameda County Fairgrounds is also holding livestock that need to be evacuated. Further south, the CZU fire has burned some 78,000 acres, which spans Santa Cruz and San Mateo counties. It is now 13% contained. CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Mark Brunton says they're making progress along the Highway 9 corridor in and around Brookdale and Ben Lomond, but the rugged, steep terrain with dense vegetation still makes it a challenge. He says they've made progress and a fire line around the coastal area of Davenport, but Bonnie Doon also remains a challenge.
Bonnie Doon area, still a lot of challenges there because of the intermix of these structures. A lot of homes in and among there. Unfortunately, a lot of them do not have very good defensible space. So it makes our job very difficult getting in there and constructing line around those homes. That's a challenge in and of itself because it's not a clear line of demarcation between homes and the wildland. They're really intermixed. So that poses a lot of challenges, a lot of extra hard work to do that. There's still a lot of fire creeping in and among there. And with the wind pattern changes, we have flare-ups. So we respond to those flare-ups. We jump on those as soon as we can.
162 structures have been destroyed. 12 structures have been damaged. Looking forward, the National Weather Service says there will be a return to warm, dry weather with little breeze, which is good in that winds fuel fire and spread embers. But it's not so good in that smoky skies will linger this coming week. Next week, there's a chance of cooler weather and more reprieve to help firefighting efforts. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for KPFA.
As Christina just reported, the Bay Area dodged a bullet when it did not experience a repeat of the lightning storm of the previous weekend. What's in store for the rest of the week? David King is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service.
We'll see a little bit calmer winds, which will be nice, and we're going to see temperatures that are pretty much normal for August. The only kind of, thing that we're going to keep an eye on that is a little bit of a negative is that the dry conditions in the afternoon are still going to be around. So, firefighters are going to still have to deal with that, but for the most part, at least for the remainder of this week, we're expecting to see a little bit quieter conditions.
David King with the National Weather Service. Wisconsin's Democratic Governor Tony Evers summoned the National Guard to the streets after police shot and wounded a black man in the back in the city of Kenosha, sparking a night of protest last night. Evers said 125 members of the National Guard would be in Kenosha tonight with responsibility for guarding infrastructure and making sure firefighters and others are protected. County authorities announced an 8 p.m. curfew. The move came after protesters set cars on fire, smashed windows, and clashed with officers in riot gear last night over the police shooting of 29-year-old Jacob Blake. In a widely seen cell phone video made by an onlooker, he was shot, apparently in the back, as he leaned into his SUV while his 3 children sat in the vehicle. Blake remained in intensive care, fighting for his life. In response to the shooting, the state's Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes called for the Wisconsin state legislature to meet in special session to take up a package of police reform bills that Democrats introduced more than 2 months ago.
And let me be clear, this was not an accident. This wasn't bad police work. This felt like some sort of vendetta being taken out on a member of our community.
Police shot Blake after they responded to a call about a domestic dispute, which apparently did not involve him. The man who filmed Blake's shooting said before the gunfire, he looked out his window and saw 6 or 7 women shouting at each other on the sidewalk. A few minutes later, Blake drove up in his SUV and told his son, who was standing nearby, to get in the vehicle. The man said he left his window for a few minutes, and when he came back, he saw 3 officers wrestling with Blake. One punched him in the ribs, another used a stun gun on him. The man said Blake got free and started walking away to his car as officers yelled about a knife and then shot him. The governor said he had seen no information to suggest Blake had a knife or other weapon, but that the case is being investigated by the state's Justice Department. The Wisconsin governor was quick to condemn the bloodshed, saying that while not all details were known, quote, "What we know for certain is that he is not the first black man or person to have been shot or injured or mercilessly killed at the hands of individuals and law enforcement in our state or our country." Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden called for an immediate, full, and transparent investigation and said the officers must be held accountable. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who's representing Blake's family, said Blake was simply trying to do the right thing by intervening in a domestic incident. This is the Pacifica Evening News on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno. I'm Eileen Alfandary. Republicans formally have renominated President Trump as their presidential candidate. Trump made an appearance before the delegates who are in person at the National Convention in North Carolina, and he claimed the only way Democrats can win is if the election is rigged. Trump said Americans can safely go to the polls, eliminating the need to mail in their ballots. He claimed Democrats were using the coronavirus pandemic as a pretext to push for mail-in ballots.
What they're doing is using COVID to steal an election. They're using COVID to defraud the American people, all of our people, of a fair and free election. And we can't do that.
Trump himself regularly votes by mail. 336 delegates gathered for the roll call vote at the scaled-down convention kickoff in Charlotte. Meantime, former Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona endorsed Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Flake was one of President Trump's most consistent Republican critics in the Senate and supported Trump's impeachment. You can join Mitch Jeserich, host of Letters and Politics, for convention coverage tonight on KPFA from 7 to 9 p.m. immediately following this newscast. The only living former Republican president, George W. Bush, will not speak at this week's Republican National Convention. Neither will former Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney, who was notably the only senator to vote to convict President Trump on one count during his impeachment trial. Other Republican luminaries are also giving the convention a cold shoulder. That stands in contrast to the lineup at last week's Democratic convention, when former Democratic Presidents Obama, Clinton, and Carter, and former First Ladies Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Rosalind Carter all spoke in favor of Joe Biden. Lily Volke reports.
At a typical party convention, the party elders, including past presidents, would have a prime speaking spot. George W. Bush is nowhere on it.
Neither are the two living former GOP vice presidents or other top Republicans who've held national office. The Republican National Convention starts today, and it's designed to portray what President Trump wants, says Professor Joshua Scacco from University of South Florida.
He is not a creature of politics of Washington, D.C. He's not. Donald Trump still wants to run like he's a challenger, still wants to run like it's 4 years ago.
But this time he'll speak every night and accept the nomination with the White House itself as a backdrop. Appearances by some federally paid Trump family and cabinet members will test both norms and laws separating political and public activities. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo speaks tomorrow, even though the country's top diplomat usually refrains from partisan politics. The week's lineup includes Trump allies of all kinds, like Mark and Patricia McCloskey, the St. Louis couple who pointed firearms at Black Lives Matter protesters earlier this summer. Charleston College professor Karen Amura expects we'll hear a lot about wedge issues like gun rights and responding to recent protests against systemic racism.
If it's anything like what Trump has been doing for the last 4 years, it won't really be geared towards bringing in new people. It will be towards riling up the base. That's what he does on Twitter all the time. That's the purpose of his messaging, to get his base very energized.
Yesterday, Twitter flagged one of the president's tweets for violating platform rules against discouraging people from voting. Trump criticized drop boxes, which are a secure alternative to mailing ballots. From Pacifica Network and Public News Service, I'm Lily Volke.
The vice president of the Navajo Nation will address the Republican National Convention. That's after the president of the Navajo Nation addressed the Democratic Convention last week. Antonia Gonzalez reports.
Vice President Myron Leiser of the Navajo Nation is among speakers listed to address the Republican National Convention, which kicked off Monday in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Trump campaign released a list of convention speakers Sunday. Leiser recently greeted Vice President Mike Pence at the International Airport in Arizona. He spoke with Pence about the tribe's fight against COVID-19 and requested a deadline extension for the use of CARES Act funding. In a statement from Leiser, he said the meeting with Pence was a chance to speak face-to-face with White House leadership and an opportunity to strengthen partnerships. Leiser mentioned the visit during a recent Navajo Nation virtual town hall.
Just the other day, it was with Vice President Pence, and we made sure that our federal family and our congressional delegation know that we need them to advocate for us. Running the nation is about relationships, and we've certainly developed and worked very hard to establish what we have now, and only to lose it, it would be something that would be terribly hard to overcome. And so we'll take those opportunities as they come.
Leiser was also among tribal leaders invited to meet with President Trump in Arizona in May to talk about COVID-19 and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez was among 17 leaders in the U.S. to deliver a keynote address last week at the Democratic National Convention. Leiser is scheduled to speak to Republicans Tuesday. Also expected to speak Tuesday is Nicholas Sandman, the teenager who was at the center of a viral video controversy involving an encounter with Native people at the National Mall in D.C. last year. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
On the eve of the Republican National Convention, President Trump announced emergency authorization to treat COVID-19 patients with convalescent plasma, a move he called a breakthrough. One of his top health officials called promising. Another health expert said was apparently pushed through for political gain.
This is a powerful therapy that transfuses very, very strong antibodies from the blood of recovered patients to help treat patients battling a current infection.
The blood plasma is taken from patients who have recovered from the coronavirus and is rich in antibodies. It may provide benefits to those battling the disease, but the evidence so far hasn't been conclusive about whether it works, when to administer it, and what dose is needed. The announcement came after White House officials had complained there were politically motivated delays by the Food and Drug Administration in approving a vaccine and therapeutics for the virus that has killed more than 177,000 people in this country. Trump had complained in a tweet that there was a, quote, deep state at the FDA that was slow-walking vaccines and treatments for COVID to harm his re-election prospects. Public health officials and others reacted with alarm and dismay at the FDA's approval of the treatment without conducting the appropriate studies. The group Public Citizen called it the most blatant politicization of FDA decision-making in history. John Swartzberg is a UC Berkeley clinical professor emeritus of epidemiology. He told KPFA Upfront host Brian Edwards-Teeker that the blood plasma treatment has the potential to be helpful, but the FDA decision to authorize its use at this point was a terrible mistake.
I think the prospects of it as an effective treatment are fair, maybe fair to good. That's my best guess at this time, and frankly, all we can do at this time is guess, because there have not been any randomized controlled trials with plasma. Let me give you a little history. During the influenza pandemic of 1918-1919, convalescent serum was used, and it was used because there was precedent for its use before that for other infections, so well over 100 years ago. We think there was some efficacy to the convalescent serum being used in 1918-1919. Since then, it's been used not in a large amount, but it's been used, and it appears to have some efficacy. So it's not surprising that it should have some degree of efficacy for COVID-19. But, you know, the FDA's announcement was couched in believe and may. Those were two operative words that I picked up out of their announcement. And frankly, we don't want to be treating people based upon what we believe and what may work. We need double-blinded control studies. So I think this was a terrible mistake by the FDA.
A terrible mistake because it could ultimately lower the public's expectations for health officials?
Of course. The FDA has just approved a drug that has not gone through any double-blinded control studies. It's a drug, essentially. That means that the FDA doesn't know whether it works or not. So it's not randomized at all. And the patients knew they were getting something that the doctors believed would work, and the doctors were giving something that they believed would work. That gives you a very powerful placebo effect. So I don't want any of the listeners to think that convalescent plasma doesn't work. There's some tantalizing evidence that it does, that it may help. There's no evidence that it is a dramatic game changer at all. It seemed to only work in those people who received it if they got it within the first 72 hours of symptoms. And it wasn't like you have a strep throat and you get penicillin and you're dramatically better in 24 hours. It was nothing like that. So even if it does work, it's not a game changer that we've looked for. So I'm very disappointed that politics has intervened in the face of science. Because as you were suggesting, Brian, if it turns out that this is either a flop, which I don't think it will be, or if it turns out to be, well, it helps a little bit, I think the public's expectations are much greater than that now with the announcements from the FDA and from the White House. And the public will be disappointed. And that's on the cusp of having a new vaccine. And if the trust is lost with the FDA right now and current politics right now, think how much trust there will be for a new vaccine that gets approved.
John Swartzberg is a UC Berkeley clinical professor emeritus of epidemiology. You can hear the entire interview on this morning's edition on Upfront, archived at kpfa.org. California cases of coronavirus continued a recent drop, as did the number of hospitalizations and ICU admissions. California Governor Gavin Newsom laid out some of the new statistics.
Hospitalizations on the report that came in yesterday showed a 20% decrease over a 14-day period, continuing to trend in a very encouraging direction, down minus 2.1% in this last 24-hour reporting period. ICUs, we are down 19% over a 14-day period, actually dropped 3.1% in the last 24-hour period. Again, trending not dissimilar to the hospital numbers over a 14-day period, down.
Over the weekend, California passed the grim milestone of 12,000 confirmed COVID-19 deaths. Newsom said the two-week average for daily deaths from COVID-19 had declined slightly to 128. He said he'll release new guidelines for reopening later this week. The hundreds of thousands of bikers who attended the Sturgis motorcycle rally have departed western South Dakota. Now, public health departments in multiple states are trying to measure how much and how quickly the coronavirus spread in the bars, tattoo shops, and gatherings before people traveled home to nearly every state in the country. The city of Sturgis is conducting mass testing for its roughly 7,000 residents. But health departments in at least 6 states are also trying to track outbreaks from the 10-day rally, which ended on August 16th. Health departments in 4 of those states, South Dakota, Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wyoming, have reported a total of 81 cases among people who attended the rally. South Dakota health officials said they'd received reports of infections from residents of 2 other states, North Dakota and Washington. The Department of Health also issued public warnings of possible COVID-19 exposure at 5 businesses popular with bikers, saying it didn't know how many people could have been exposed. The infectious disease director at the Minnesota Department of Health advised people to quarantine for 2 weeks if they attended the rally. She said, we're going to see many more cases associated with Sturgis. No indication that those who attended the rally, many without distancing or wearing masks, would be likely to follow a quarantine request. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy told a House committee today he has warned allies of President Trump that the president's repeated attacks on mail-in ballots are not helpful. But he denied that recent cuts at the Postal Service are an attempt to sabotage the November election. Kate Ida reports on today's contentious House committee hearing.
Reports of delays in U.S. Postal Service deliveries across the country have poured in since July. In California, delayed mail service has led to rotting meat and spoiled fruits in post offices. Life-saving medications have been delayed, and thousands of baby chicks shipped to small poultry farmers have arrived dead. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, who took over the position in mid-June, testified at a House Oversight Committee hearing. Lawmakers demanded answers as to why mail service has been delayed so much since he took office. Massachusetts Democrat Stephen Lynch told DeJoy that the delays are unacceptable.
After 240 years of patriotic service delivering the mail, how can one person screw this up in just a few weeks? We can only reach 2 conclusions. One, either through gross incompetence, you have ended the 240-year history of delivering the mail reliably on time, or the second conclusion that we could gather is that you're doing this on purpose and that you're deliberately dismantling this once proud tradition. My last question is this.
Thank you.
What the heck are you doing?
President Trump, after attacking mail-in voting multiple times, acknowledged that he's blocking emergency funds to the Postal Service to make it harder to process the expected surge of mail-in ballots during the November election. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, millions of Americans are expected to avoid polling places and cast their ballots by mail. DeJoy, a donor and ally of President Trump, told lawmakers that he is, quote, not engaged in sabotaging the election, end quote, and said that he had told allies of President Trump that his attacks on mail-in ballots are not helpful. But DeJoy maintained, under questioning by Silicon Valley Democrat Ro Khanna, that he will not reconnect the mail sorting machines that have already been disconnected.
If it costs less than $1 billion, regardless of whether it's efficient or not, what is the harm in just putting those machines back until Election Day, just for the peace of mind, for the confidence of the American people? Even if the machines, in your perspective, don't do anything, what is the harm to do it till Election Day?
In Washington, it makes plenty sense. To me, it makes none.
You haven't explained why. And then final question.
Because they're not needed. That's why.
But if it will restore people's faith in a democracy and avoid a polarized electorate, I would think...
Get me the billion, and I'll put the machines in.
Okay, well, that's a commitment.
On Saturday, the House of Representatives released internal Postal Service documents that documented steep declines and delays in mail services since early July. The documents show delays in first class and marketing mail, periodicals, and priority mail. Lawmakers are questioning DeJoy's ability to run the organization. Orange County Democrat Katie Porter questioned DeJoy on his knowledge of Postal Service operations.
What is the cost of a first-class postage stamp?
55 cents.
What about to mail a postcard?
I don't know, ma'am.
What if it's like one of those greeting cards that's a square envelope? Then what is the postage?
I'll submit that I know very little about a postage stamp.
I'm concerned about your understanding of this agency because you started taking very decisive action when you became Postmaster General. You started directing the unplugging and destroying of machines, changing of employee procedures, and locking of collection boxes.
DeJoy owned a logistics business that was a longtime Postal Service contractor, and he has significant financial stakes in companies that do business or compete with the agency. This has led to concerns about conflicts of interest. The Postal Board of Governors, appointed by Trump, gave DeJoy the position. Massachusetts Democrat Ayanna Pressley questioned the chair of the Postal Board of Governors, Robert Duncan, about the process the board used to select DeJoy.
Were you aware when you selected Mr. DeJoy that his company, New Breed Logistics, was determined by the National Labor Relations Board to have acted with anti-union animus? Yes or no?
No.
Were you aware that the Equal Opportunity Commission won a $1.5 million lawsuit against New Breed for sexual harassment and retaliation? Yes or no?
No.
Did you make any attempt to investigate these labor and employment practices before making him the head of one of the largest and most diverse federal workforces?
Yes, we have various background checks.
I question the integrity of that background check if you don't have answers to these questions.
On Saturday, the House of Representatives approved legislation that would reverse the recent changes in U.S. Postal Service operations and send $25 billion to help the agency ahead of the November election. Trump urged a no vote on the legislation and warned he would veto it if it passed in the Senate. Though Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has been considering a $10 billion postal rescue as part of the next coronavirus relief package, he says the Senate won't pass standalone legislation to help the Postal Service. 26 House Republicans broke with Trump and Republican leaders to support the House bill. It passed 257 to 150. Reporting for KPFA Pacifica Radio, I'm Kate.
This is the Pacifica Evening News on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno. You can hear the entire newscast or selected reporter stories archived online at kpfa.org. I'm Eileen Alfandary.
Hi, this is Mitch Jeserich, inviting you to join us on this radio station for Pacifica's live coverage of the Republican National Convention, starting Monday, August 24th, and going through Thursday, August 27th, starting each night at 7 p.m. on the West Coast and 10 p.m. on the East. We'll have the main speeches, we'll talk to progressives, and yes, we'll talk to conservatives too, and we'll be taking your calls. So join us for Pacifica Radio's coverage of the Republican National Convention.
That starts tonight at 7 p.m. As Tropical Storm Marco fizzled out, the Gulf Coast turned its attention to Laura, another system following just behind that could grow into a supercharged Category 3 hurricane with winds topping 110 miles per hour and a storm surge that could swamp entire towns. Still a tropical storm for now, Laura churned just south of Cuba after killing at least 11 people in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, where it knocked out power and caused flooding in the two nations that share the island of Hispaniola. Laura was not expected to weaken over land before moving into warm, deep Gulf waters that forecasters said could bring rapid intensification before hitting the Gulf Coast from Texas to Louisiana squarely in its sights. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards says his state was only going to dodge the bullet so many times, and the current forecast for Laura had it focused intently on Louisiana.
The most significant part of this is from the Texas line to the Atchafalaya River. It's forecasted now that they can expect 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. That's a big number. The other important thing to remember is that even if you don't live immediately on the coast, this storm surge could impact areas well away from the coast. And this is especially true when you think about the rivers that are not going to be able to empty as they normally would because the storm surge is preventing that from happening. And then the rainfall that's going to be happening inland that's going to cause those rivers to surge.
Global warming has caused hurricanes to grow more intense and hit with more ferocity. In Port Arthur, Texas, Mayor Thurman Barty warned that unless the forecast changes and pushes Laura's landfall farther east, he'll ask the city's more than 54,000 residents to evacuate starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Officials in Houston asked residents to prepare supplies in case they lose power for a few days or need to evacuate homes along the coast. State emergencies were declared in Louisiana and Mississippi, and shelters were being opened, a task complicated by the COVID pandemic. A Lakota organizer of a July 3rd protest of President Trump's visit to Mount Rushmore wants his case to go to trial after a judge found probable cause for his felony charges. Nick Tilson faces 3 felony and 4 misdemeanor charges. Altogether, 150 Native American protesters and allies used vans and their bodies to shut down the road and a checkpoint to Mount Rushmore to protest President Trump's July 3rd speech and to call for the Black Hills to be returned to the Lakota people. 15 were arrested. Lee Strubinger reports on the pending trial of Tilson, the founder of the NDN Collective.
Nick Tilson says he will not consider a plea deal.
Oh no, we're going to trial. We're not taking no plea deals. These charges are all unfounded.
Tilson faces 3 felony charges. One alleges that he stole a shield from a National Guard soldier. Another charge claims that Guard member was afraid of, quote, bodily injury. The third felony charge is for allegedly directing a van towards a police officer. Protesters used 3 vans to block the highway leading up to Mount Rushmore before the fireworks show in July. The state says those individuals were outside a protest zone established in Keystone, east of the monument. Brendan Johnson is one attorney representing Tilson. He says they want a jury to see the entire picture.
And that is what we will be emphasizing, that there were a group of other protesters there that were behaving inappropriately, including behaving inappropriately to law enforcement. This was a situation that we don't believe needed to escalate in the manner in which it did.
Tilson supporters have collected more than 14,500 signatures asking the Pennington County State's Attorney Mark Vargo to drop the charges. They handed over those documents after a preliminary hearing. Vargo says he doesn't comment on pending cases.
I'm at something of a disadvantage. I don't get to have a conversation with you about the whys and the wherefores, but I will certainly take this seriously, and I will review both these petitions and other outreach that we've received.
Tilson faces up to 16 years and 30 days in jail. No other hearing or trial dates have been set. For National Native News, I'm Lee Strubinger in Rapid City.
Melania Trump has in the past been caught on video appearing to bat away the president's hand, leading to speculation she's not overly fond of her husband. Now, a former friend of the First Lady is releasing a book which claims she has recordings in which Melania trash talks Donald Trump and his family, especially daughter Ivanka. Melania's former friend and staff member Stephanie Wolkoff has authored a book called Melania and Me, The Rise and Fall of My Friendship with the First Lady. Wolkoff reportedly recorded Melania without her knowledge or permission. No details of what the First Lady said were immediately available. The book is due to be released next week. In a separate but related development, Trump's older sister, a former federal judge, is heard sharply criticizing her brother in a series of recordings, at one point saying of Trump, he has no principles. Marianne Trump Berry was secretly recorded by her niece, Mary Trump, who recently released a book denouncing the president. It is called Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. Mary Trump said she secretly recorded her aunt in 2018 and 2019. In one recording, Marianne Trump Berry says she had heard a 2018 interview with her brother on Fox News in which he suggested he would put her on the border to oversee cases of immigrant children separated from their parents. Berry says, quote, I mean, my God, if you were a religious person, you want to help people, not do this. At another point, she says, his goddamn tweet and lying, oh my God. She adds, I'm talking too freely, but you know, the change of stories, the lack of preparation, the lying, holy S, she says. Berry can also be heard saying she guesses that her brother has never read her opinions on immigration cases. What has he read? Mary Trump asks her aunt. Berry responds, no, he doesn't read. At another point, Berry says to her niece, quote, it's the phoniness of it all. It's the phoniness and this cruelty. Donald is cruel, his older sister says. Tennessee protesters will face harsh penalties, including losing the right to vote for breaking certain laws during demonstrations under a measure signed into law by the state's Republican governor last week. Governor Bill Lee previously conceded there were portions of the bill he would have done differently, but he ultimately agreed to sign it, and it goes into effect immediately. Most notably, the new law now states that those who illegally camp on state property would face a Class E felony, punishable by up to 6 years in prison rather than a misdemeanor. Felony convictions in Tennessee result in the revocation of the right to vote. Lawmakers advanced the bill amid nearly 2 months of frequent protests outside the Capitol. The mostly young black activists who spearheaded the demonstration had been calling for racial justice reforms and for a meeting with the governor. More from Lily Volke.
Some Tennessee protesters may lose the right to vote since the Republican-controlled state government has made camping on state property a felony. Convicted felons there are automatically disenfranchised. State Representative Jason Hodges, a Democrat, opposes the new law.
We seem to not worry about protesting when we as white people show up to our capitals with AR-15s. But when black people show up with signs, it just seems like all of a sudden we want to pass legislation to stop protesting. And so that's just a little concerning to me. And maybe that's why the protesters are out there in the first place.
I'm Lily Bolke.
This is the Pacifica Evening News on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno. You can hear this newscast each weeknight at 6, half-hour edition on the weekend. I'm Eileen Alfandary.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Edwards-Teekert.
And I'm Kat Brooks.
Weekday mornings, we host Upfront.
2 hours of conversation about what's in the news and what should be.
Politics, technology.
Prisons, police.
What's happening in City Hall and at the State House.
In Washington and in the streets.
That's starting at 7 a.m., right after Democracy Now!
On Upfront.
The unprecedented scope of the CZU wildfire in Santa Cruz and San Mateo counties has forced thousands of residents to become first-time fire evacuees. Some of them say that while they'd seen the catastrophic fires in Sonoma, Napa, and other northern counties for the past several years, they didn't believe they'd face a similar conflagration. KPFA's Ariel Boone and Lucy Kang headed to the Half Moon Bay High School relief site this weekend to talk with people who were forced to flee the CZU fire.
The fire started coming down the south side, and you could see 200, 300-foot shots of flames going straight up and just trees exploding. And the line of the fire, you could see it creeping down slowly down the hill. I'm Becky. I'm from Loma Mar. We were at a warning, and I decided to get the camper and the kids packed up and leave and head to our friend's farm.
The group of fires in the Santa Cruz Mountains known as the CZU Lightning Fire Complex continues to rage in Santa Cruz and San Mateo counties. The fire started with lightning storms early in the morning on Sunday, August 16th.
We could actually see the lightning the night of the fire. I actually got up at 3 a.m., was woken up by the wind blowing through and seeing trees getting struck by bolts and catching fire and then staying lit up like a candle.
Becky is one of many San Mateo County residents who came by the evacuation center set up at Half Moon Bay High School. Many of these evacuees are from rural communities and work in agriculture. There are tents set up here with donated food and toiletries, stacks of bottled water and Gatorade, and even books. Of course, being in a pandemic, some things are different because of the coronavirus.
I'm going to check your temperature and we'll ask a few COVID questions. 97.0, perfect. Any recent coughs, colds, fevers, exposure to chickenpox, measles, mumps, or COVID in the last 21 days?
A physician assistant volunteering from Stanford Children's Hospital was taking forehead temperatures and screening people for COVID-19 symptoms at the entry. And while KPFA was there, 2 state public health workers visited the site to make sure precautions against COVID were being taken. Everyone was wearing a cloth mask or an N95 respirator and staying 6 feet apart. If evacuated residents had to wait for hotel vouchers, they sat in single chairs, spaced out in the shade.
And then right after that, they have a couple of tables where they can grab drinks, water, food, and toiletries, flashlights, blankets, other things that they may need during the time that they're going to be out of their homes. I'm Rita Mancera. I'm the Executive Director of Puente de la Costa Sur, a nonprofit organization that serves the area that is being currently affected.
Rita and her team from Puente are volunteering and helping to run the Half Moon Bay High School Evacuation Center. And Rita had to evacuate from her own home on Tuesday.
Where we live is in a canyon, and I have a 13-year-old, so we decided we were going to take off. My husband and I packed each of us one suitcase with, clothes and important things and paperwork and whatnot. And my son, he got away with 3 suitcases so that he could get some of his special items with him.
Puente's staff have been posting regular Facebook updates on the fire and evacuations for community members in both English and Spanish. And they launched an emergency fire relief fund for the families they serve, many of whom are farm workers. At the evacuation center, they're helping to sign people up for hotel vouchers. Because of the risk of transmitting coronavirus in congregate settings, evacuated residents can't stay the night at the high school. It's not set up with cots. So they're given a voucher and some supplies, and they leave.
And they right away they get to go to their hotel. So the process is really fast. We were estimating that maybe they're here about perhaps 15-minute stops, and then they get to go.
Jesus Flores evacuated from Pescadero on Friday night.
So I seen a post online, but I didn't really evacuate till the police came and actually told us that we had to get out. They said it was mandatory, that we were going to get trapped in there if we didn't evacuate, so it's pretty scary.
Now he's staying at a hotel with his family. They have 2 rooms between them. But on top of having to evacuate, he's worried about the COVID risk for his parents, since diabetes runs in his family.
It's really hard, if we get something like that, it'll be dangerous for them, You basically have to stay in your room the whole time, you don't really come outside. I mean, it's not really comfortable, because you don't have all your stuff there. You just have what you got. You don't have all your clothes, you have to be worried about all that. Especially about the home.
Jesus' family had their hotel room automatically extended on Saturday because the evacuation order was extended. But it makes him even more worried about the possibility that the fire could destroy his home.
Our home, it's scary, The fire gets to us, where are we going to go, It's like we've been here for 14 years, so it's scary,
Rita Mancera of Puente de la Costa Sur says that if more houses are lost, it could shrink the limited housing stock available, especially for the many farm workers and immigrant families who live here on the South Coast.
Because in our community, housing is already very limited. The stock available is not big, and everything that is available is pretty expensive. Like in our area, you cannot get a 2-room house for less than, $2,700 a month. And so these units that are being burned down are going to create a tighter market. And particularly our community of farm workers and other immigrants that earn very low wages are going to have a tougher time finding a place that they can afford to rent.
Thousands have had to evacuate for the CZU Lightning Complex fire. And for everyone we spoke to, it was their first time evacuating for a fire, unlike the Lightning Complex fire in the North Bay, where some are evacuating for the third or fourth year in a row. Others have lost not just their houses, but their livelihoods as well. Here's Donica Marquigard from San Gregorio. When we met her, she was searching for permission to get past the roadblock established by the San Mateo County Sheriff so that she could evacuate her animals. But she wasn't getting anywhere with her request.
We're talking about hundreds of cattle that need clean drinking water, they need pasture, they need to be handled well. We supply meat for the whole Bay Area, good grass-fed meat. And these animals need to be treated with care. We are the only ones that haul our livestock. We don't want them in anybody else's care. And we have the equipment, we have the manpower, but we're not being allowed. And I feel like in Sonoma County, it was no problem.
Donica says she's so focused on the animal evacuations that she hasn't had time to grieve another personal loss. A house in Big Basin that her husband has been building since 1997, where the couple was hoping to retire.
We've already lost so much in this fire, and it completely burnt to the ground. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing we could do. That place was like part of our soul. And so we haven't even paused to be able to be sad about it and grieve that because we've been evacuating stock nonstop around the clock. And now we're being told we can't do it. And we got to keep going. It's going to be a long, long road ahead.
From Half Moon Bay, I'm Ariel Boone for KPFA with reporting help from Lucy Kang.
Fire officials say some evacuees of the LNU North Bay fire are being allowed to return home. CAL FIRE Incident Commander Chief Sean Kavanaugh says those returning home should do a safety check first.
When you go back into your homes today, if you've been out of your homes, I ask that you just do a safety check of your residence and your property. Make sure everything is good and safe around your property. If there's down debris, trees, if your property has been burned, just take a check of your property. People have been through there, but to make sure the roads are open and everything else, but I ask everybody just check your homes, check your property, make sure it's safe to re-enter your home.
CAL FIRE Incident Commander Chief Sean Kavanaugh. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says a proposed gold and copper mine at the headwaters of the world's largest sockeye salmon fishery in Alaska would cause unavoidable adverse impacts. The Corps is asking the backers of the Pebble Mine to come up with a mitigation plan within 90 days for nearly 3,000 acres of land and nearly 200 miles of streams it says could be affected if the controversial mine moves forward. Backers of the mine downplayed the significance of the finding. They also claimed the news was not related to recent tweets by influential mine opponents, including Donald Trump Jr. Yet it was a seemingly stunning reversal for the Army Corps, which just last month said in an environmental review that the proposed mine under normal operations would not be expected to have a measurable effect on fish numbers nor result in long-term changes to the health of commercial fisheries in Bristol Bay. But since that initial position by the Army Corps of Engineers, some high-profile Republicans, including the president's eldest son, urged Trump to intervene to block the mine. Families and survivors have had their first chance to confront the white supremacists who slaughtered 51 worshippers in a mass shooting at 2 New Zealand mosques as his 4-day sentencing hearing began today. 24 victims and family members told the court about the pain of losing husbands, wives, sons, and brothers. Some had family members around them for support. Others spoke through translators or on pre-recorded videos from abroad. Breton Harrison Tarrant has pleaded guilty to murder, attempted murder, and terrorism. He could become the first person in New Zealand to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which is the toughest sentence available in the island nation. The hearing began with prosecutors giving the first detailed account by authorities about what happened that day, including the revelation that Tarrant had intended to burn down the mosques. Ollie Barrett reports.
Brenton Tarrant had plans to target a third mosque in New Zealand in 2019, his sentencing hearing has heard. He's pleaded guilty to 51 counts of murder over the attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch. The 29-year-old faces life in prison. His sentencing hearing, which started in Christchurch on Monday, is likely to last around 4 days. From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on Russian authorities to conduct a full investigation of the poisoning of dissident Alexei Navalny and to bring those responsible to justice. Merkel issued the statement after German doctors treating Navalny in a Berlin hospital said tests indicated the presence of so-called cholinesterase inhibitors in his system. The substance is found in several drugs, but also in pesticides and nerve agents. Doctors treating Navalny said the specific substance to which he was exposed hadn't yet been identified. More from Simon Marks.
German doctors treating Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny say he was poisoned last week in Siberia. They say Mr. Navalny remains in intensive care in an induced coma. They're still trying to determine the specific toxin that was used in the attack, but they're treating him with a drug used in cases of nerve gas and pesticide poisonings. The German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says Mr. Navalny is receiving protection in hospital.
The suspicion is not that Mr. Navalny poisoned himself, but that someone poisoned Mr. Navalny. And there are unfortunately 1 or 2 examples of such poisonings in recent Russian history. It was clear that after his arrival, security measures had to be put into place because we are dealing with a patient who was likely the target of a poison attack.
Simon Marks, Washington.
Zoom experienced partial outages during the first day of school for thousands of students who are relying on the video conferencing technology to connect with educators. The company said it began receiving reports of disruptions around 9 a.m. Eastern Time. It said it identified the issue causing the problem and worked up a fix. Grade school, high schools, and universities are relying on Zoom and competing technologies for online instruction. French President Emmanuel Macron is insisting his country will send millions of students back to school starting September 1st, despite France seeing the biggest weekly spike in confirmed coronavirus cases since the height of the outbreak in the spring. Authorities attributed the increase to summer vacation parties and family gatherings and to workplace clusters emerging as people return to their jobs from a strict lockdown. Concerns are mounting among teachers and parents in France that schools will not be able to keep the virus at bay with children in classrooms. A leading French teachers union asked the government this week to delay the start of the school year. Russ Collin reports.
The surge in cases has mostly been registered among the young, and while hospital admissions have risen, there was only 1 new fatality in the last 24 hours in France. With 1 week left of the summer holidays and unions still worried about the coming start of the new school year, the president of France's Scientific Council admits there will be coronavirus cases in schools when term begins. Jean-François Delfrécy says there will be contamination, children will become infected, probably some teachers too, but we will manage it. Ross Cullen, Paris.
Much the same thing in Britain, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is asking parents to set aside their fears and send their children back to school next month. Parents and teachers are not convinced, as Benji Heyer reports.
Students are preparing to return to school in parts of the UK, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson is pressing home the message that the risk of contracting coronavirus at schools is very small. He claims it's far more damaging for a child's development and their health to be away from school any longer. His sentiments are echoed by the UK's chief medical officers, who believe missing school is a greater threat to children than COVID-19. Benji Heyer, London.
Weather forecast for the San Francisco Bay Area. Partly cloudy morning skies, then sunny with highs in the upper 70s to mid-80s around the bay, mid-90s well inland. Smoke and hazy skies from the wildfires will persist. In Los Angeles, low clouds and fog in the morning, then sunny. Highs from the mid to upper 70s at the beaches, mid-80s to around 90 degrees well inland. In Fresno and the central San Joaquin Valley, sunny with a high of 97 degrees and areas of smoke. Thanks for joining us for the Pacifica Evening News. Janine Eder produced recorded portions and is at the controls. Be sure to stay tuned to KPFA. Coming up next, coverage of the Republican National Convention hosted by Mitch Jeserich of Letters and Politics. I'm Eileen Alfendery. Be sure to stay tuned.
This is a community announcement for August 2020. Yoga and Qigong instructor Amelia Barilli continues to offer a free 1-hour workshop via Zoom every Saturday. These workshops are designed to de-stress as well as boost and balance the immune system. A brief Q&A period is included. The Spanish language workshop is at 11 a.m. The English language workshop is at 3 p.m. The Zoom link is posted on her site at ameliabarilli.com. That's AMELIABARILI.com. She also has health information on her YouTube channel, The New Paradigms. This community announcement is produced by the First Voice Apprenticeship Program. Please send your event for consideration to calendar@kpfa.org. To hear this announcement again, call 510-848-6767, extension 621, or view it online at kpfa.org.